Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Keppel. Today, we're also with Greg Whiting. Greg's a healer who helps leaders and entrepreneurs heal the anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and trauma that they can't think or talk their way out of. What's going on, Greg? Welcome.
Hey, Kevin. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Kick us off. Tell us a little bit about you and who and how you serve.
Yeah, absolutely. I developed Prisma, which draws upon trauma and neuroscience, somatics, and mindfulness and energy medicine, really on my own journey, healing my own pain. I am 3 inches taller today than I was 25 years ago. And on my journey healing, I've kind of pieced together all the frameworks and tools that I needed. I found a lot of traditional approaches to healing were ill equipped to kind of address the imprints of trauma stored in the body. So it was a long and windy road. But as I started to piece together, and find my way, in the last 20 years, I've kind of reverse engineered, what I've discovered to make healing more practical and accessible for others. So today I primarily work with leaders and entrepreneurs, people who are really made of purpose, but they're lacking the fulfillment. They're reaching a point where they realize that maybe their trauma is what's been a primary driver. And as much as it's helped build a certain level of success, it's, leading to some emptiness, the burnout, the overwhelm. And so folks who are looking to lead from a different place, right? And so, anxiety, depression, chronic pain is what often gets people in the door, but really finding more aliveness, more power, more freedom, and leading from a place of heart and authenticity is what I think inspires people to continue to lean into their journey.
Yeah, very cool. A lot of the things that you said are pretty parallel to a lot of the things that I'm helping the leaders that I work with move towards. Just probably a little bit different way that we get them there. But I think that at the end of the day, we all want to feel like alive and happiness and aliveness. And it's like we get caught up chasing these like models of success. Like, well, if I just make more money, then I'll be happy, or get this relationship, then I'll be happy. I'm like, yeah, but until you treat the cause, right, the pain's going to remain. At least in my experience, is that pretty on track with the work that you do and what you're seeing?
Yeah. A lot of that drive is this hustle for one's own worth, right? Which is coming from, imprints in early development. And once we kind of are checking off all the boxes extrinsically and we still don't feel good inside, we need to start to reevaluate. And so, I'm really compelled to help people take a journey from pain to purpose and start to live from a more intrinsically motivated place, right? What makes us tick? What brings us to life? What do we live for? And then it's not so much what we do, but how we do it, right? And who we are then informs how we lead. And, leaders and entrepreneurs kind of have just naturally attracted to my work. But in my own journey before, the work I do today, I worked in the nonprofit realm and it was very similar, very purpose driven. But my effort to kind of like save the world, if you will, was destroying myself, right? Because I wasn't seated inside myself. So I was losing myself in my mission to do good. So yeah, helping people find themselves in a way that they can then continue to be of impact, but from a place of being, right? From a place of deeply understanding kind of their place within themselves, which I think helps us understand our place in the world.
Yeah, that I want to go a little deeper on one of the phrases that you used at the beginning of that, where you said something to the effect of turning pain into purpose. And I'd love to know, how or what that could potentially look like.
Well, I think a lot of us are looking for purpose externally, right? We're trying to find our purpose. And I look at healing as helping us discover it from the inside out. And that's really helping to kind of make sense of, a lot of times trauma is lived experience that is too much too soon, or too much too long. But traumatic imprints are often what are lived experiences that have been historically overwhelming, that we can't fully make sense of, we can't fully process. So I look at healing as helping, and that can leave kind of gaps in kind of the timeline of our life, right? So it can kind of leave us feeling fragmented and split. So I look at healing as creating more of a cohesive through line, so we kind of understand, you know, all of the imprints along this timeline of our lives and start to derive more meaning and place and significance from these experiences. So I love to look at it as, can we mine the gold of unresolved trauma, right? And as we start to make meaning of the most adverse experiences in our life, it starts to inform kind of a deeper understanding of ourselves, which I think becomes, helps us become more steeped in presence. And then that presence becomes a healing force for good. I think of the role of a leader is to be a vessel of healing, right? And so if our job is to regulate the collective nervous system, that starts inside our own nervous system. And so what if that in and of itself, our capacity to be present, is our purpose, right? It doesn't necessarily mean we switch careers or that, the outer, functioning of our job changes. It might just be how we are showing up in that function transforms.
Yeah, I love, just the connecting meaning, because without like meaning, it's like, you're not really even, what are you working for? What are you working to create? You're not looking to make more money. Like getting a big pile of money is going to make you just as happy as a big pile of hammers. Like, yeah, you may have more access to stuff, but happiness is an inside job. That's what I'm really hearing from you. And I think that is so often overlooked. It's like, like maybe it's not, what do I need to do? What do I need to stop doing? What do I need to focus on? Because if I focus on pain, I usually get more pain. And so how do we stop, in your, opinion, how do we stop chasing, suppressing, and treating such symptoms and actually heal, as opposed to, avoidance or whatever, your way may be currently?
Well, I think something you just said, we are often, the mind is always tracking what's wrong, what's dangerous, and so a big piece of the work is the mind training to reorient from pain to possibility, right? And because when we continue to focus on the pain and the hurt or run from it, but then our energy and our drive is still organized around the pain, that's going to really compromise our ability to just be present, right? And be still. And so much of the mind training is helping us really cultivate the capacity to set our sights on a horizon of possibility, and set our gaze, beyond our pain. And so the mindfulness is really developing more of an awareness that we're not our pain, that we're not our pain body. We're not the identity structures organized around the pain. We're not the beliefs or the behaviors structured around the pain. And that training then helps us locate just an ever expanding field of awareness that is more of the truth of who we are. So we start to tease out who we are not, what we are not. Because especially these imprints of trauma in early development, and then whatever kind of piles up through the course of our lives, that starts to mold us, right? We start to wear the costuming of the pain body. We start to wear the costuming and the masks of our wounding. So it's really understanding that that's not who we are. They may be sophisticated strategies that have helped protect us or keep us safe, or in some extreme cases helped to keep us alive. And while sometimes these functions are necessary and helpful, they're not who we are. And so a lot of the work is to not only understand that intellectually, but to register that, through our physiology, through our nervous system, through our body.
Oh, yeah, that's, gosh, so good. So talk about the pain body a little more, just to make sure that everybody who's listening really understands what that is or what that means.
Yeah. I mean, so I mentioned how I, had a severe curve in my spine. I'm 3 inches taller today than I was 25 years ago. So when I was living in chronic pain with this severe curve in my spine, the wounding of trauma was literally stored in my body. So, trauma, our connective tissue and fascia is what really holds us together. And the connective tissue and fascia is what pulls on the muscles and bones. So the skeletal system isn't really holding us up so much as the fascia. And the fascia is actually where we store memories and emotions. And so as we start to store trauma in the tissues, that's creating stagnation, right? And I look at health as movement and expression. I look at illness and disease as stagnation. So if we continue to store these
Hold on,
imprints,
hold on. Say that last thing again. That's such a good point. I want to hear that again, please. Sorry to cut you off.
No problem. Yeah, I could look at health as expression and movement of our life force energy, of our awareness, of our thoughts, of our emotions. And I look at disease as stagnation, right? This holding, this calcification, this rigidity, right? This fixed identity, right? Because who we are is change, right? That change is our nature, but imprints of trauma kind of stop us in our tracks. And so that freeze response, for example. So as we're wearing the imprints of trauma in our tissues, that's creating inflammation, that's compromising our immune function, that's, clouding our thought, that's compromising hormonal balance. Hormonal balance is completely tied into emotional balance, behaviors, beliefs, mindset. So all of that, is the perfect storm for just holding us in a fixed, rigid identity organized around these imprints of trauma. So in my case, with the severe curve in my spine, as I was hunched over, that was a lot of guarding and protection. That was a lot of fear living inside my system, telling me that I'm under threat, right? And so energy medicine is one of the vehicles I work with that I find is really powerful at helping to regulate the nervous system, calm the cardiovascular system, strengthen immune function. And I think those three pieces, if we can, get them online, just help us come back in contact with our innate ability to heal, right? And so in my case, as I, got plugged back into my innate wisdom, which I can, define that as well, that helped me release the costuming of the wounding, that helped me release the pain body and the identity with the pain body. So I no longer had to hold it in this rigid, physical posture. But it's like the emotional imprints started to heal first, and then how the emotional imprints had stagnated in the body started to then dissolve and resolve. So yeah, that term innate wisdom, it was developed in chiropractic. And so innate wisdom, if we have a paper cut, there's some healing wisdom or mechanism inside of us that sends platelets and proteins and orchestrates all these biochemical transmissions to heal the paper cut. And the wisdom in that is that it can happen, that innate wisdom's functioning to heal that paper cut while we're having this conversation, while I was sleeping, while I was eating my breakfast. So this innate wisdom is our natural capacity to heal. And it's not dependent upon thought, right? It's happening beyond, our conscious mind. It's this subconscious healing force. So that stagnation, when we have the trauma stored in our body, breaks down internal communication and it compromises our connection to our innate wisdom. So healing is just clearing out that stagnation so we come back into alignment with our innate wisdom, where healing happens, despite ourselves.
Oh man, that's really such a eloquent way of saying something I like to think about and maybe say in a much more amateurish way. But it's like, it's either acceptance or resistance. I think those are the two options we have, and which is like creation or reaction. And, like the reason the Dead Sea's dead, right? Because nothing flows out of it. And it's like, man, like you said it earlier, change is one of the guarantees we get, right? Things are going to change. We're going to change. And that's like stopping a function of life when you're resisting in whatever form that takes. And I love that you went deep on that. I think that's so powerful. And let's talk about a little bit on the other side, medication's one of the places people go immediately to, heal things. And a lot of times it's just covering up the actual cause, right? It's more of treating an effect. And so, until I take care of the cause, the symptoms are going to remain more or less, just maybe not as loud. And so, how do you help people reduce or eliminate their dependence on antidepressants, anxiety, sleep and pain meds, and all that other stuff?
Sure. First, I want to acknowledge that sometimes pain and symptom management is necessary.
Sure.
And my work with my clients is non-diagnostic and non-prescriptive. So I don't actually give any advice in terms of medications. I have a psychiatrist that actually refers his patients to me who have complex trauma and PTSD. He learned of my work because we had a shared, one of my clients was his patient, and all of a sudden she no longer was in need of, the cocktail of medications he had been prescribing her for some time. And, to his credit, he got curious and, was really interested in what had changed for her. She said she'd been working with me. So he reached out to have a conversation. And now, I'm his top referral partner when it comes to helping people with PTSD. So, yeah, a lot of folks are treating chemical imbalance as if the chemical imbalance is the cause of anxiety or depression. And that just, the research hasn't proven that. And so it may help people manage some of their symptoms, but is it actually getting to the root cause or the causative factors, which are often, trauma and, childhood attachment. And so, and if people are taught that, well, I'm treating the cause, it also then signifies that there's no other work to do, right? And so it shortchanges a lot of folks' ability to actually do the deep healing that's very much possible and available, because they're just caught in this loop of just treating the symptom. Fortunately, there's more and more awareness that, of trauma. There's more and more awareness around childhood attachment. And then I think there's many more resources and tools and practitioners becoming available to help people kind of heal what's beneath the surface. But I mean, I growing up, I had chronic ear infections and strep throat, and there was nothing more I wanted than to go to a doctor, take a pill, and get better, right? So that's just the culture we live in.
Sure.
Again, I think that's changing, and I think that's changing a whole lot. But it's, there's some lag time, right, in how we bring more awareness to healing and, the capacity of the body to heal, which is, really remarkable. But we haven't been exposed to that in kind of our dominant cultural paradigm.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, that's starting to shift, hopefully. And, like as well as the stigma of mental health, right? Like we take care of our bodies. We want, physical health. Why wouldn't we want mental health too? And, when it comes to trauma, I remember for the longest time, I was like, well, I didn't have anything like, really horrific happen to me. And so I don't really have trauma, right? And I would minimize things that were traumatic, for 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Not that even anybody did anything to me necessarily, just like things that happened that like maybe I didn't have the processing capability for. And so I was just curious, like, do you ever find yourself like just needing to give people permission almost to like experience or own the trauma, right? It's instead of repressing and acting like, it's all good.
Yeah. Well, a couple things there, in terms of the stigma, which I also think is starting to shift. But if we are taught that, the chemical imbalance we have is the cause of our depression and our anxiety, then it's pointing the finger at us, that there's something wrong with us that needs to be treated so we can resolve anxiety and depression. And I like to flip the script on that. What if our anxiety and depression is actually a very, very healthy response to an unhealthy environment, right? But being told that we need to treat this chemical imbalance then makes anxiety and depression and mental health, kind of this personalized individual thing when we should be looking at the broader culture that's making all of us sick. Um, and, and I think, again, more of that's starting to happen. And I forget the other piece of your question. Forgive me.
That's all right. It was like really long and kind of rambling, so I'm amazed you followed any of it. But I would be curious. I think you started to touch on it a little bit, but it's like, garbage in, garbage out, right? If we're putting in things in our body, then that's what's going to come out. So, what does like the nutritional aspect, have to do with healing and return to homeostasis, so to speak?
Sure. I'm not a nutritionist, so that's nothing I would speak into from,
Sure.
a place of professional expertise. I work in tandem with a lot of naturopaths and functional medicine doctors. So oftentimes, there's an invitation for clients, that I'm partnering with other healthcare professionals to, cut out processed foods, cut out sugar. Oftentimes if there's a lot of stuff going on, to kind of shift to maybe a paleo autoimmune protocol, just to really flush out, inflammatory foods to give your system kind of the climate to kind of rebound and recover. With that said, a lot of those practitioners refer patients to me when they are doing all of that. They're on the paleo autoimmune protocol. So they're eating all the right things. Their lifestyle's spot on. They're doing all the right supplementation, and they're still not getting better. So that's when those practitioners are kind of signaled into, oh, there's more stagnation, which isn't because of what's coming in. It's because of what the body's still holding on to, which is the residue of trauma. So then those folks will refer those patients to me. Or on the flip side, there's just sometimes the thought of making all those lifestyle changes is just too overwhelming, right? And so that could be, again, a trauma response. So I'll also have folks who are like, I'm not ready for that protocol. That protocol is just anxiety producing. There's no way I can make that many changes in my life. That feels too destabilizing. So then we work, again, to resolve the trauma stored in the body. So then people can start to get more aligned. The more we become aligned to our innate wisdom, then the more our tastes actually change. And we're more inclined to be drawn to things that actually nourish us on a deeper level. I had a client, this is, over a decade ago, who, she was actually coming to me there was trauma, but there was also a back injury. And so we weren't even focusing on nutrition, but as her emotional body healed, so did her tastes. And, she was this high-powered CEO, and she literally joked that she had lived on coffee and candy corn. And now she's like, what did you do to me? She's like, I'm eating leafy greens and like grass-fed beef. And again, no recommendation on my part. That's not the scope of my work, but her taste actually changed, and she was now drawn to eating things that nourished her, as opposed to, the addiction to sugar. The body speaks in metaphor. So if we are, holding on to trauma, we are likely experiencing kind of a lack of emotional sweetness in our life. We're lacking a sense of emotional nourishment. So the sugar becomes a really easy replacement for the sweetness that we're lacking in our relational lives, in our emotional lives, right? So if we start to heal those emotional imprints and develop more meaningful, healthy relationships where our emotional needs are being met, we're less likely to lean on, the sugar or the wine, right? And so much addiction is just really a disease of isolation, right? And that was to your point. So I'm getting back to the part of your question I forgot, but so much of trauma is, it may not be that a big, horrible thing happened to us, right? We may not be coming back from a war zone. We may not be refugees displaced from our home. We may not be victims of violence or abuse or assault. But trauma is often lived experience where we feel under-supported, isolated, and alone. And in early development, and I think this is the more insidious trauma that a lot of the leaders, like high-achieving leaders that I'm working with, it's the lack of emotional attunement in early development, the lack of consistent care So in early development, many of us grew up having to be the adult in the room because we couldn't rely on our primary caregivers to give that consistent support, right? So then that sets up this dynamic of hypervigilance and needing to be on guard and needing to take care of everything and everyone, so our awareness becomes so externally fixated that we start to forget about our own needs. We start to lose track of our own needs, our own desires, because we're taking inventory of what everyone else needs to keep everything out here okay. And so then at our own expense. So, yeah, I'm kind of going on a bit of a journey.
That's great,
here.
man. Keep going. It's all good.
So to say that so much of trauma is just helping to restore a sense of connection, restore a sense of safety, right? So how much of our life is being driven by isolation and fear?
Yeah. I think those two words, safety and connection, man, that it's like everybody wants to feel safe. Everybody wants to feel connected to themselves and connected to other people. Because like if I'm disconnected internally, which I was for a long time, I had great difficulty in connecting with other people because like I can't give you something I don't possess. And I think that's man, so powerful and important. I love what you're doing. And I would imagine you've got lots of people that are resonating with this who are listening because, we've all had stuff, right? And I want to make sure and honor your time. So let's go in a little fire round here. I got some quick questions and quick answers for you. You give me the quick answer. I'll give you the quick question. How about that?
Sure.
But what's a piece of mindset advice you give to somebody who, feels like they have some unresolved trauma?
You can't heal in isolation, so find support. And if you're not ready, find support, because sometimes support can feel like too much. That could feel too threatening. Follow the breadcrumbs. For me, it was reading books on mindfulness, and then it was time in nature, and that kind of led me into working with, healers and healthcare professionals.
Yeah, gosh, those two things right there. Like I still do those both daily, and every single time I feel better, for it. Whether it's being still and just being aware of what's going on inside, or just being outside. And a tree's a pretty powerful thing if you'll let it be. It's it's the truth, so to speak. What's something in your life, Greg, that's non-negotiable?
Yeah, for me, I have lots of non-negotiables from, exercise, which, that has changed over the years. I used to be, a really committed yogi and practice yoga daily for like 14 years. Now I'm more into like weight training, but some sort of movement. I love to ride my bike. I have some friends that, swim and off of China Beach here in San Francisco. So I'm considering becoming a swimmer again. Yeah. I swam a lot as a kid, but yeah, movement is a non-negotiable. Sleep is a non-negotiable. A clean diet is a non-negotiable. Lots of dance. All my self-care practices, basically the things I share and, teach with my students and my clients, energy medicine, somatics, mindfulness. Those are all big pieces. Community, friends, support, play, art, lots of non-negotiables.
Very cool. Let's say,
can I add to that?
Sure.
Though? Because I know it's easy to rattle off a list and then folks to be like, all right, well, now I need to do, what are my non-negotiables? Yeah. And sometimes the underlying residue of trauma is going to get in the way of those non-negotiables. So I never want to have a list like that and have people feel like they're stuck, just like my clients that come to me when they can't, uphold the protocols that their functional medicine doctor or their naturopath are providing them. Sometimes we need to do some deeper healing to open ourselves up to kind of feel our capacity to commit to non-negotiables.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because then you could actually end up worse off than you started, right? Like you feel bad about not being able to do the quote unquote simple things, right? Like, exactly. I can't even do this right. It's like, maybe I'm just meant to be this way. And that is not true. So what's a favorite book to read, recommend, or give away?
I love the Radiance Sutras by Lauren Roche. These sutras from, I'm not going to pronounce it right. I won't even say it, but it's these tantric texts, and he just does a brilliant translation. And it just helps you really come into contact with the subtle energy body. And A lot of translations from tantric texts kind of are very scholarly and dry, and yeah, kind of fall flat, where his language just really carries like the energy and the flavor of the work.
Who was the author again? Or the
Lauren
translator?
Roche,
Lauren Roche.
Roche, and the Radiant Sutras. Yeah.
Cool. And what does freedom mean to you here on the Unlock Your Freedom podcast?
I think aliveness, authenticity, truth. Yeah, just being oneself.
Yeah. Why not, man? There's only one, right? Why wouldn't you own that? That's a great answer. All right. Last question. Where can people go to learn more about you and engage with you?
Yeah, gregwhiting.com. You can learn about my one-on-one work. And I also have an online community and program where I teach, Prisma, which is kind of a trauma and neuroscience roadmap, the somatic and mindfulness-based practices, and the energy medicine. So I teach all of those and pair them together to give people a really robust and comprehensive, toolbox to heal trauma, anxiety, depression.
Very cool. So do you teach teachers as well, or just teacher to student?
So I have certified healthcare professionals in my methodology who want to have a trauma-informed healing practice at their disposable or at their hands. And yeah, a lot of folks are not in that lane. They just want healing tools for themselves.
Sure.
So both, yeah.
Very cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to share with us today. This is really important work that you're doing. I'm grateful there's people like you doing it. So one last thought and we're on our way. So let's have it.
Yeah, a lot of folks find me when they're at the end of their rope. A lot of folks have tried everything under the sun. I had a client come to me after being in traditional talk therapy for 3 decades, and they came to me through that psychiatrist who had been medicating them. They were also being treated with medication from a neurologist, and to his credit, even though all of those decades and all of those treatments were not helping him, he didn't give up, right? He kept leaning in. And so if you're at the end of your rope and you're still struggling and you haven't moved the needle on your pain, you need to continue to lean in and be your own advocate and continue to reach out and explore and find the right modality, find the right practitioner. And if you haven't found it yet, just keep looking. You may need to take a break and catch your breath and dust yourself off, but the body is highly adaptive, and we often have these maladaptations to stress and trauma, but it's also highly adaptive to loving environmental input that helps to support healing and helping us get back plugged into that innate wisdom. So don't give up, and follow those breadcrumbs. For me, those breadcrumbs led me to energy medicine, which then led me to mindfulness, which then led me to trauma and neuroscience. And so you kind of can build your own toolbox or use a toolbox that someone else has created.
Yeah. Well said. Thanks again for being on here. And I would encourage you, if you're listening and something spoke to you, definitely reach out to Greg, because he's a very powerful guy, and he's got a big brain, obviously, and a big heart. So I think he'd be able to help you a lot and serve you in ways that could benefit you in a myriad of ways. So thanks again for being here with us, Greg. Thanks you guys for being here. We love y'all. Thanks for listening. See y'all next time on the Unlock Your Freedom podcast.